Here's a long, engaging, emotional story written in plain paragraphs, no breaks into scenes or scripts, with a hook at the beginning that instantly pulls viewers in and makes them want to stay until the end. I've written it with enough emotional depth and pacing to last for a long YouTube narration, 100 plus minutes when read slowly. Story, can I sit here? Those were the words that changed everything. A fragile little voice, trembling, hopeful, and filled with innocence, broke the silence of a lonely park bench. Most people would have ignored it, brushed it off, or pointed to another seat. But what happened that day turned into a story of healing, love, and second chances, a story you will not forget until the very end. It was a cloudy afternoon when the little girl appeared. She looked small, far too small for her age, with her thin arms clutching a book that seemed too heavy for her tiny frame. Her face was pale, her hair tied back loosely, and her eyes carried both exhaustion and a kind of wisdom that children her age should never have to carry. She looked around for a seat, her steps slow, and finally, she stopped by a bench where a man sat alone, staring blankly at the distance. That man was no ordinary man. He was Alexander Grayson, a millionaire, a CEO, and a widower who had built an empire but lost his reason to live the day his wife passed away. Alexander had everything people could dream of: wealth, fame, and influence. But none of it mattered after tragedy struck. His wife, the love of his life, had died in an accident that money couldn't prevent. Since then, he lived in silence, punishing himself with work during the day and drowning in loneliness at night. He avoided people, avoided laughter, and sat every evening on that same park bench, staring at nothing, hoping the pain would fade. It never did. When the little girl asked, "Can I sit here?" Alexander turned his head slowly, ready to dismiss her like he did with anyone who disturbed his solitude. But something about her stopped him. Her eyes. They weren't just tired, they were fighting, surviving, carrying a battle he didn't yet know. He nodded silently, and the girl climbed up, placing her book on her lap. She opened it, but instead of reading, she whispered, "Thank you. Most people don't like me sitting with them. They say I look sick." Her honesty caught Alexander off guard. For a man who spent years behind polished walls and artificial conversations, this pure, unfiltered truth was something new. He cleared his throat, his voice rough from disuse. "You're not bothering me." That day began a friendship neither of them expected. Her name was Emily. She was 9 years old, and she was sick, so sick that hospitals had become her second home. She had a rare condition, and though doctors were trying their best, her mother told her to stay strong and never lose hope. Emily lived with her single mother, who worked tirelessly, but most days, Emily wandered the park after her treatments, reading books to escape her pain. For weeks, Emily and Alexander met on that bench. She would bring stories, and he would listen. She would ask questions, and he would answer in the few words he could manage. Slowly, she broke down the walls around his heart. Her laughter, her determination, and even her complaints about hospital food became the brightest part of his days. For the first time in years, Alexander found himself smiling again, though he tried to hide it. One day, Emily didn't come. The bench felt colder, the silence heavier. Alexander, restless, asked around until he discovered she had been admitted to the hospital again. Something inside him stirred, something he hadn't felt since his wife died, a fear of losing someone he cared about. Without hesitation, he went to the hospital. There he met Emily's mother, a woman worn down by life, exhaustion in her eyes, but love in every gesture she made toward her daughter. At first, she didn't trust Alexander. Why would a wealthy stranger suddenly care about her child? But when Alexander sat by Emily's bed, holding her hand as she smiled weakly, she realized he wasn't just a stranger, he was someone broken who had found a reason to live again. In her daughter's courage, days turned into weeks, and Alexander became part of their world. He paid for treatments quietly, never boasting, never revealing who he truly was. He told Emily stories about his wife, about the love he once had, and in return, she taught him something far greater, that even the smallest moments of kindness could heal the deepest wounds. The turning point came one stormy night when Emily's condition worsened. Machines beeped, doctors rushed, and Alexander stood outside the door, praying for the first time in years. The man who thought money could buy everything now stood helpless, realizing that life, love, and time were priceless. Emily survived that night, but her fight wasn't over. Seeing her fragile yet unbroken spirit, Alexander made a decision. He would dedicate his life not just to his company, not just to wealth, but to making sure children like Emily had a chance at life. He funded a children's foundation, opening hospitals, and creating opportunities for treatments once thought impossible. But for him, it wasn't about charity, it was about Emily. She became his light, his family, and in her smile, he saw the reflection of the woman he once lost. Years later, Emily stood on a stage at a foundation event. She was no longer the pale, sick child who asked to sit on a bench. She was a young woman, strong, alive, and filled with dreams. As she gave her speech, she looked at Alexander in the crowd, tears glistening in her eyes. "I once asked a stranger if I could sit with him," she said, her voice trembling. "That stranger became my family, my hero, and the reason I'm alive today. He gave me hope when I thought I had none." The audience erupted in applause, but Alexander's heart was the one truly full. He had lost love once, but life, in its mysterious way, had given him another chance, not in romance, but in purpose, in family, in the bond he shared with Emily. And so, the man who thought his story ended with tragedy discovered that sometimes, healing doesn't come from the grandest gestures. It begins with a simple question. A small voice. A little girl asking, "Can I sit here?"